Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. This is the inaugural joined-up webinar between Totaljobs and Universum. So hopefully you'll get some good stuff out of this morning. A couple of housekeeping pieces, I guess, to start with. This session is being recorded, and so we'll be sending around the link to the session post the event. For your reference, and also if you've got any questions, hopefully you do, please do use the questions bar on the side there and ping them through to us during this session. We will save some time at the end, Steve and I, for questions, but if we don't get through them all, we'll try and answer them offline as much as we can. So quick introductions, I think, to kick off with. My name's John Cooney. I am the Business Solutions Director here at Totaljobs. My role is to kind of drive the data agenda within the organisation. So I'm going to be sharing some research with you today, quantifiably around what's happening in the market in terms of what candidates are doing. And I'm going to introduce you to my colleague Steve Ward from Universum.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, so I'm the UK Director of Universum, research-based employer branding and EVP communications. So I will be covering a little bit more about what businesses are doing about the COVID situation, how they're communicating, and some of the things that we're learning and advising on the way in which we probably should deal with people and our employees during the course of this time.
Yeah, so the headline of the session is putting your people at the heart of employer branding during COVID-19. The really interesting thing is with the combination of our businesses, you get to look at kind of quantifiably what's happening in the market, what the data is telling us, but from Steve's angle, also emotionally and emotively what people are feeling at this time. And that combination is unique. So hopefully you'll find it very, very interesting. Before I start, actually, I want to give you a sense of where Totaljobs are coming from and how this research can be deemed to be authentic. You know, as a company, we have nearly over 12 million visits regularly per month to our job board. And in April, we had nearly 500,000 people change or update their CVs. So seeing what's going on within our database and within our data really does truly reflect a large proportion of the market or the UK recruitment market as a whole. We have over half of the individuals working individuals in the UK in our database. So the data we share with you today is representative of the UK market and can be used internally within your organisations. Before we get into things as well, I wanted to talk through kind of the state of play. And a lot of the themes we're going to be covering today, you'll know about, you'll be thinking during this period, but we want to add some meat to the bones. We want to give you some quantifiable research to take back to your organisations and say, we need to action some change here. So we ran some research with the British Chambers of Commerce recently. This is information we've gleaned from over 700 businesses. We asked them two sides of the coin. What's happening with your employees? And also, as an organisation, what are you doing during this period? And kind of the headline pieces we got back were that from the employee's point of view, 2/3 of individuals are re-evaluating their careers currently. So what does that mean? Does that mean they've overnight switched off being interested in working from their employer? Probably not. But what it does mean is this period of time has allowed them to reflect and think, do I want to get on the train 5 days a week? Am I enjoying spending more time with my family than I ever have done previously? And what are we doing as organisations to respond to those themes? And then from a business perspective, the BCC run a coronavirus impact tracker, which looks at how businesses are augmenting their services and structures over the last couple of months. And we've seen businesses move to a more online servicing model, whether it be sales or delivery. And also they're diversifying their products and solutions. So you would have seen automotive companies building ventilators. Louis Vuitton have released a line of hand sanitizers. I don't have any yet. But you know, are these things here to stay? And also, what impact does that have on your employees if kind of the mandate and overarching themes of your companies are changing? And don't forget, another theme I wanted to get across today was all of these things are happening in a microcosm of time. They've happened in less than 8 weeks. And what does that mean to your organisation and the employees that work for your companies? as I said, we're going to share some research from Totaljobs, and no surprise, we've seen huge changes in the types of searches we're seeing across our 20 million searches on a monthly basis. I'm seeing those changes go hand in glove with the press and the popular subjects that are being covered today. And so 6 weeks ago, we saw huge changes in searches around supermarket jobs. People just understanding there's real opportunity for them to go and pick up casual work in those frontline services. That's changed recently and moved more towards construction and engineering. And searches for B&Q and Homebase have really hit the high notes recently. But what this means is there's going to be a window of opportunity for your organisation. No matter what segment you work in or what sector your organisation's in, there's going to be a window when your business comes back online, and there's a chance for you to engage with candidates that maybe you couldn't reach out to before because they were out of scope, or not being able to contact. So I want you to be aware of that and be mindful and try and pick when your industry or organisation is going to come back online, because there's a chance you can get in front of some really great candidates. A big stat here, but one that you've probably seen. The ONS figures came out today, this week, talking about the seismic change of individuals working from home. Again, these themes aren't new to you, I'm sure, but you probably didn't realise the extent that pre-COVID, there were only around 1.7 million people working from home in this country. So over 8 weeks, that has morphed into 2/3 of the working population working in their kitchens or their bathrooms or whatever it is. That's difficult. That's difficult to deal with. 70% of those individuals actually have never really worked from home before. So what are your organisations doing to kind of empower people through this change? How can they harness the upside of this, actually, because there's some positivity coming out of this period of change that I'm going to share with you. And also, which Steve will come on to, how does this reflect your employer brand today and your internal communications today? And then also going forward, what's the long-lasting impact of this within your organisation? And hopefully Steve can share some examples with what businesses are doing now to prop themselves up in the future around this topic. One of the things that we did, we thought, well, let's find out what people are thinking and feeling during this period. What are our candidates saying about how they're trying to maintain their relationships with their peer group and their colleagues during the COVID-19 piece? So we interviewed 2,000 workers from our database of 20 million. We asked them a number of questions about around this topic. And actually, we worked with Dr. Aaron Balick, who's a PhD in psychotherapist. He's a cultural theorist. So we took some professional advice as well on this topic, which we thought would be useful. And a couple of headline things that came out of it were that actually 86% of the people we interviewed were currently worried about their peer group and employees that they work with. What's interesting is we didn't ask that question 8 weeks ago. It wasn't really on the agenda if you cared about the people that you worked with, but now it's a topic we really want to research as an organisation. And actually 81% of people said they are making more effort to reach out to their colleagues during this period. That's great. People are sharing more with their peer group than ever before. So we're chatting outside of work hours. I've been on a number of social events online with my peers and colleagues, quizzes, that sort of thing. Stuff that I probably wouldn't normally do, but feel like I need to make sure I've got those personal relationships in place. And what we want to say today is there's some good things that are coming out of this period of time. And we want to make sure that your organisations continue to harness those good things when life returns slightly more back to normal. The good things are colleagues are feeling closer to each other despite the distance that we're seeing. From the 2,000 workers we interviewed, 70% said positively their perception of workers has been changed. I myself have shared more about my family than ever before. I've had my dog on phone calls with my CEO. That would never have happened 8 weeks ago. My son walking into a webinar with his top off would have been the only thing people would have remembered from my presentation. But now that's kind of normal. And so I'm not suggesting that should happen on every webinar that we run, but those things are part of life. And there's more of an ease around accepting those things than ever before. And I think if we can bring some of that into the workplace when things return back to normal, there's going to be more empathy with each other, more respect, awareness, and definitely more friendship across your working groups, which underliningly will deliver more productivity from your teams. And conversely, actually, the silver lining among this uncertainty is that people actually have responded really well to this support from individuals. 71% of the workers we interviewed actually felt like they were being supported by their peer group, and 77% grateful for it. Probably with my British stiff upper lip, if you asked me 8 weeks ago, you know, do you need help from your colleagues? I'll be fine, be all right, don't worry. But actually, those cursory, casual meetings around the coffee machine, or people coming around your desk to see how you're doing, they're really important. You probably didn't realise or respect those things quite as much when you were in the office as to now. And so much so that 82% of the people we surveyed said actually they feel like they can cope with this situation perfectly fine. And these things that we're doing as individuals really help your employees through this period. So again, what I wanted to put across is, are these situations happening just from a personal perspective? So are your employees organising these quizzes, organising these social get-togethers, making sure they're reaching out to people and having those relationships off their own back, or is something more orchestrated going on with your organisation? And maybe Steve can touch on that later on, but it's a question I want to pose. Because there's a negative side to all of this as well, and from the research that we've seen and that we've run, 55% of those same people actually said at times they're feeling quite lonely. They're not getting that face-to-face normality they have with their peer group, and necessarily they're not able to just pop around themselves and get some reassurance from maybe their line manager that they might do over lunch or a pint after work, etc. And so we need to be cognizant of that as an organisation. We need to realise that we need to put things in place to ensure this collaboration and this reassurance is in place from a corporate perspective, not just a personal one. We ran some research in 2018 around the causes of loneliness at work, because loneliness can be driven in a number of ways. And the key thing I wanted to pick out from this research, actually, we ran this research with the charity Mind to try and understand more the impact and causes of loneliness, was the fact that 26% said not knowing anyone was a driver of loneliness. And I thought to myself, well, I've been at Totaljobs Group for 3 years now. I've got a nucleus of people that I know I can rely upon. I also understand where I need to go to get things done or to ask questions. And I have a relative level of reassurance that my productivity and performance is in line with company expectation, hopefully above, but in line at least. And so for me, working from home and not having these touch points, I can cope with. But imagine if, you know, March the 1st was your first day in an organisation, maybe a global organisation. Imagine how the following 2 months have made you feel, where you're not sure if you're performing at the level you need to. You're not sure whether, you know, you're able to ask questions of people that might be a dumb question. And that actually really is going to play on people's mind and manifest in some areas. And it's going to manifest into, heightening your stress levels, for instance. If we can move to the next slide, thanks. Yeah, so 68% of the people that feel like they've got some loneliness, it's heightened their stress levels, it's reduced their self-esteem, it's changed their sleep habits, and ultimately has affected their productivity in the workplace. So by not putting these rigid structures in place, by not encouraging people to try and act more normally in terms of supporting each other and building out these communication streams, productivity of your organisation is going to be impacted. So I guess you're saying, well, thanks for that, John. There's clearly some problems that our organisation need to deal with. What can we do to kind of counteract those themes within our organisation? Well, we thought about this as a business, as a team working with marketing, and we thought we'd just share with you some of the things our company have done because I'm sure your organisation's got some really great communication strategies during this period, or got some programs in place. But we thought we'd just share with you what Totaljobs have done. Bear in mind, we have a number of offices throughout the UK. We've got around 1,000 people. Half of those are technology and product people. Half of those individuals are actually sales, marketing, etc. So different types of psyches and different types of mindsets, I guess. The first thing our team were very quick to deliver was a wellbeing program. And this really is around building networks of individuals across the organisation that have similar levels of interest. So it might be exercising, it could be around technical development, it could be around CSR, it could, charity work, etc. But we have pockets of groups of individuals that are like-minded that you can become part of. And we've made those resources very easily accessible for individuals, and now they take up a part of the week for a number of hundreds of individuals across our business. So this was something that was kind of an ongoing piece of work anyway, but we've expedited it through this process. We've platformed it, and the feedback we've got from our teams and our staff has been really positive around this. So that's one key takeaway I think you can have. The second is, and this is probably happening within your organisation, but only 16% of the UK workforce are actually part of a mentorship programme right now, which is a very low proportion, and that has reduced during this COVID-19 period. So we're suggesting that you buddy people up, not just within your teams, but across the organisation. This does a couple of things. I think it shows you that there are other people that you wouldn't normally speak to feeling reacting emotionally in the same sort of way, and it also gives you a sounding board to talk to people around the things that you want to find out, the questions you want to ask, and just a shared piece of learning. So I think I'd put this at the top of the kind of agenda if it isn't already. And secondly, something we've done is we've reached outside of our organisation to various marketplaces, particularly the marketplaces we serve. So a good example is our customer services team on our caterer.com brand, which is our job board that serves the hospitality market, have reached out to 100 individuals at the Hospitality Action Golden Friends scheme. So older individuals that maybe don't have the medication or food supplies that they need. And we've got an ongoing piece of work to touch base with those individuals over the coming months. So I think this does a few things. Obviously, let's talk about it. It's a thinly veiled piece of PR. It's great that we're doing this in the market. We can talk about it to our clients, right? There needs to be a commercial agenda, I suppose, at some point. But actually, it's allowing our teams to put some good back into the marketplaces that they serve, make themselves feel useful, make themselves show that they're making a difference outside of just the corporate agenda through this period. And the fact that our organisation has asked them to do this, I think, has great reverberations long term around their commitment to stay with Totaljobs Group as an employer. And I'm sure the third piece here you're thinking about as an organisation, engaging with your staff, making sure that there's some creative stories and solutions going around the company. It doesn't always have to be about work. So our CEO sending around a weekly email, and 50% of it is around how we're doing, what's going on. But the other 50% is more around, look at our sales leaders with their fitness class this week, or here are some pictures of the kids, working with their headsets on in the kitchen, and just sharing some kind of real kind of practice across the teams and best practice, and also always with one eye on, we're looking at how we're going to get back to normality as quickly as possible. I feel like people need that reassurance that is being worked on and it's being managed and metered as best as the business can cope with. And our company, I have to say, have done a really good job at that in these circumstances, which none of us have ever really been through before. So just some things that I wanted to share with you that our company have done. And again, some of this might not be brand new thinking to you and your organisations, but hopefully we've given you a depth of research you can rely on to help prioritise some of these themes, and also some case studies from maybe either a partner or a potential supplier of yours and what they're doing. And the important thing to note is people's perceptions are massively changing at this point, and you have a chance as an organisation to cultivate that, whether it be the perceptions of potential or future employees of your organisation. You know, we've got a chance to shape what they think about your organisation through your employer brand and your comms, or through your internal comms that you've got, you know, rolling out at the moment. What you do now will massively affect your churn rate over the coming years. And so if these things aren't on the agenda of the boardroom or your CEO, whoever makes these decisions within your organization, they should be. So again, hopefully you can deliver some of this material during those meetings and those conversations to raise these things up the agenda, because, you know, at the moment, from our research, 25% of employees actually feel more loyal to their employer than they did pre-COVID. If you're not part of that 25% as an organisation, you're really missing a trick. And actually, over a third of individuals feel more positive about their employer, and that will have a long-lasting impact. So finally, for me, just to reiterate, you know, 2/3 of people are kind of reevaluating their careers right now. 1 in 5 has said they're not happy, and 1 in 5 said they're spending time searching and planning for a new career today. So it's poignant timing as we're coming out of this period and industries come back online. These themes are going to be paramount to the future kind of success of your organisation. So I implore you to take them seriously. What I'm going to do now is hand over to Steve, who's going to run through some great research from Universum's point of view, and also share with you some examples of how other businesses in different segments are appropriating themselves through this period. So Steve, over to you.
Thank you, John. Really interesting stuff. Thank you for that. Really good setup for what we're talking about here as well, in relation to the fact that trying to understand how employees are feeling at the moment, what their behaviours are, really gives us an indication of what we need to be doing as organisations. So I'll walk through some of the kind of guidelines as to the things that are working, the things to think about, and some considerations to think about as well. Who are Universum? For those who don't know who we are, we're part of the same group as Totaljobs. We're all part of the Stepstone family. We're a global insights-driven employer branding consultancy. So every year we research 1.6 million students and professionals around the globe in 40 different markets, and get a feel as to what those people feel about brands, what their aspirations and career aspirations are, what their drivers are, what are the trends that are affecting why they're choosing different organizations. And that pinpoints down into very specifically a ranking around who are the most attractive employers. In fact, we're only 2 weeks away, June the 2nd, from announcing the UK's most attractive employers award. So look out for that. We use that data to build logical solutions around employer brand communication and EVP by understanding external audience as well as internal audience feeling and perception upon brands. The external bit and the internal bit are super useful, but either way, I've always loved this quote. If we could move to the next slide. People will forget what you said, people forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. I think we've seen this a little bit over recent times, because it probably is one of the most pertinent messages around employer brand during the COVID-19 experience that we're going through at the moment. It really, the phrase that's been used a lot, which I don't love, but I think I understand it, is the way our organizations react and respond to the COVID-19 situation towards our employers will define our employer brand, will define who we are as organizations. So I think that's a little bit of an overbold statement, but actually there is obviously a modicum of truth and relevance within that, because we talk a lot at Universum around how do you make people fall in love with brands, and how do you create an emotional connection. And the way we make people feel is really important part of that emotional connection to brand, either as an employee or as a potential candidate on the outside. When we did some research recently to over 2,000 TA and employer brand leaders, as part of a bit of research we did at the end of March and into April, we asked them the question, what are the 3 words you would like to be remembered for during this period? And you can see a very overwhelming lean towards the emotional element of care, safety, people first, and communications and human, as well as pride as well on the left hand side, which is something I hold on to quite a lot as well. So this is what people are hoping that there will be represented through this, how they will be represented through this kind of period. If they achieve this, then their protection as an employer, their brand as an employer, and their appreciation as an employer will be maintained. So very interesting, super strong words that focus on well-being and support rather than necessarily on commercial values. Doing good stuff, and we've heard about, I mean, I'm going to go through a number of examples as we go through this, as the things people doing, and John talks about a few of the sort of things that are being done as well. But just because we're doing things, and because we're running off that list of all the available opportunities and activities and initiatives that we can run, doesn't mean that everybody is okay. And so what we tend to do as organizations quite a lot is put out things. We do things, we arrange things, we tell people things, and we create big group scenarios. But look at the little, you'll see this full list shortly, but when we ask people, what are you doing during the course of this period, the lowest ranked one was internal sentiment surveys. It was the thing that companies were doing the least during the course of this period, whereas you can see a few examples. There's a big list that you'll see shortly of things around team meetings, telling stories, town halls, sharing, etc. All these things are obviously brilliant and great storytelling stuff, but let's not forget the individuals through this as well. So a little couple of things that we've seen that have been done well, things like doing one-to-one, making sure that one-to-one meetings and one-to-one engagement is maintained, as well as all the Zoom parties and all the fun stuff and all the group stuff. Some people aren't made for Zoom parties. Some people don't feel that they're at their optimum when they're doing quizzes or whatever else it might be that we're running internally. So think about the one-to-one bits. Do impulse surveys, do in touch reports, look inside your organization independently and just ask them how they feel, and trying to get some ideas of doing this. We do this, we have a product exactly for this. In fact, we did it for ourselves as an organization this last couple of weeks, just to get a feel as to how the Universum employees around the world are feeling during the course of this situation. How is the company supporting us, and are we happy with what the company is doing? Are we happy with our leaders, etc.? Really great studies to help us really get a temperature check on how people are they okay? Are they feeling okay? What can we do better, etc., etc.? And we're going to run that every 2 or 3 months just to make sure that we're continually evolving and supporting the needs of the organization. And another thing John mentioned actually is one of the in his lists is upskilling people as well. Again, when people are feeling vulnerable, to demonstration of support by saying, I've seen organizations that have improved their training budgets in this period to say, right, while you can't deliver as much as you would normally do, or while you're on furlough, here's some here is a fund to go and get yourself skills in something either relevant to your work or relevant to something you want to be better at yourself. So that's one of the options. We do one for the talent acquisition industry and employer brand industry by running an employer branding academy. One of our large customers put all 200 of their global recruiters on our employer branding academy as a way to sort of say thank you for the work you're doing. Let's get better as an organization. We're going to skill you with recruitment marketing skills and employer branding skills, because we believe that will be an important part of your future role. This is the time to go and do it. We'll pay for you to do that. So a number of things to think about when we're doing outbound things. It feels like we're doing the right thing, but sometimes we have to understand how people feel individually through this process. Next slide. Another thing I'm going to just touch on briefly here, I won't go through this deeply, but this is a hat tip to my colleague Carolina, who brought this to a webinar that we did a couple of weeks ago. And the 5 stages of grief are very much played out in the COVID period. And this is, this goes back to that thing John mentioned earlier about 55% of people feeling lonely at home. And in fact, actually, it was the one thing when we did our internal pulse study at Universum, the one feeling, the number of all the list of feelings, the one that was most pertinent, or the most negative feeling, was the feeling of loneliness and distance from colleagues and all that kind of stuff. It's hard. You can do all the things you like, but loneliness is tough, because we have to go through these stages of analysis of the way in which we're handling this. We go through this journey of denial, anger, despair, into bargaining, and then acceptance. And that period of denial, anger, and despair, it's a really hard. It's hard for all of us. We all know it, right? We all know the denial stage, which is that thing we probably had back in March, but we still see a lot of it now about, It's a hoax, it doesn't mean anything, it's the same as flu, why are we putting so much pressure on it, why am I not allowed to go out? It's kind of like, yeah, it's been blown out of control. We still see this around the world in society. We also have the anger period of the of riling against power and blaming people for why it's the case. In this examples here, things like it's China's fault, for example, because it all started there. If they'd have done this earlier, then so we've gone through these. We all recognise these processes, and on the right hand side, we have to think about as organisations, how do we deal with those periods of grief and strain and stress that we go through in this period. So at the top of those things, in the time when it's most hard and we're uncertain, we're unaware and confused, it's really important as organizations we maintain strong, clear communication of the truth and the facts and the information that they need to still feel empowered as an employee and supported as an employee. So it's very important that we deliver facts and we deliver clear messages to our employees, not conjecture. When people move into the despair phase, which I think we all know very well, it's happened a lot in these last few weeks about the uncertainty. I don't know whether I'm going to have a job at the end of the year. I don't know whether I'm going to have any money left for kids. What's going to happen? We're going to go into an economic crisis. What's that going to mean? Etc. Etc. So these things are again periods that totally affect our employees and will affect their performance and well-being. So again, this is where companies need to think about their emotional support and think about those one-to-one scenarios and listen. Spend some time listening. We talk about communication a lot in employer branding, but we need to listen. Going back to those pulse survey kind of ideas that I mentioned that we do. Understand where the kind of despair is coming from. And then in that kind of response phase that we go through is that kind of bargaining into acceptance, that kind of, oh, it'll be all right if I go and see my friend, but maybe I don't know, we'll just take a beer with us and we'll stand at, we'll sit on the edge of a bench or something, and we'll catch up, it'll be fine, and all these things we've done to kind of go, if I do this little bit, maybe I'll be okay. And we go through this, we're trying to find answers for ourselves, and we're trying to find ways in which we can survive through this, and that's that bargaining phase. And of course the acceptance phase, which I guess a lot of us have got into quite comfortably now by all accounts, about the fact that we kind of got used to this. We're kind of the resilience, particularly us as Brits, we're very good at the stiff upper lip and the resilience factor. In fact, actually, not even just Brits, in Universum, I think we found 82% in the studies that are in pulse survey, 82% of people showed signs of resilience, which is a really high factor, which sort of demonstrated a characteristic within our organization, I think it's probably fair to say, but as well, that we are very resilient as people. We find ways out of this, but we waver through these stages. And as organizations, we have to understand and recognize that it isn't a simple straight line, that people drop back into despair and anger and go through periods where, frankly, they just don't feel great and can't perform as a consequence. So think about these things. Do consider where employees might be in this area and how we need to communicate and listen accordingly. And from a communications perspective, just a couple of three key things to think of here. Use simple messages. Try and avoid Borisisms. Try and focus on clean, clear messaging. Don't get into conjecture too much. Send out key messages fast. Responsiveness of organizations and the speed of responsiveness in organizations is a really important factor to making sure that the well-being of and the understanding of their people is maintained, that they understand what the company is standing for at a certain period of time and what is important to the organization, how they're supporting it. So really make sure that we prioritize our communications down to what is most important and what needs to be delivered at speed. And the trusted source of information, I think people depend on their employers a lot in this period of time. We depend on guidance, and we need direction in these periods. And so the leadership and the authority that comes from our organization is never more important than now. I mean, John will have referred to the CEO of Totaljobs being very strong and clear. Our parent company, Stepstone, the CEO, again, each week delivers some very clear, clean messages as to where we're at, what the stages are, and what's going on. And the same inside Universum, we have a consistent messaging from leadership as to what is going on, almost on a daily basis and definitely on a weekly basis. So super, super important. And to show some examples of where leaders have done this with major organizations around the world, there's two elements to think about here. We see examples from Visa, really strong statement from Visa, from the leader to say, look, we're not going to add to this challenge. We want to support our employees during the course of this time. Mark Benioff of Salesforce, very positive message. Greg Bracker from TD Bank, and the one in the bottom right corner, I think, caught many people's hearts, because particularly given obviously they are in a highly effective industry at Marriott. That very heartfelt, clear message. It was an emotional message, but showed the true heart of a leader. In fact, and this is not, and as we see from these, this is not just about how we communicate internally to our people. These aren't just messages for inside our organization. These are delivered on Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook and through video, because they are messages to the outside world as well. Because for a company like Visa, Alfred Kelly doesn't want to just reassure his employees. He wants to reassure his customers. He wants to reassure future talent. He wants to reassure their connections around the world and their advocates and supporters around the world of the brand. And so the message is not, the messages of reassurance are not just internal. The way we're perceived externally through this process is also extremely important, because of so many reasons. From a B2B angle, this is strong messaging, but from an employer branding angle, the way we're perceived as employers will be impacted by these messages. And straight away, when I was on a call with Visa a couple of weeks ago discussing Universum data, and of course, and naturally, I alluded to this quote from their CEO, and they talked to the pride they had for their CEO through this, and that's great. And I heard the same from the Marriott one. I saw that Marriott video because a friend of mine who is a colleague who works for Marriott posted it on Facebook, no less, just because he was so proud of his CEO's very poignant message, a very strong message in these times. He wanted to share it even with his personal friendship audience. He didn't need to be on LinkedIn. So all of these things have an external impact as well as an internal impact when we demonstrate strong leadership. Next slide. And from a comms perspective, how do we choose, when we think about how we need to be perceived at different stages, externally as well as internally, but again, looking at the external scenario, there are different examples of how companies are having to deal with this at the moment. Some are hiring, some are holding, and some are downsizing. If you're hiring, if you're still growing, obviously there are companies out there that are still growing at pace. John alluded to companies that are clearly in growth mode at the moment because of the necessities. There are other companies that are just continuing to grow because we need them so much. Think of something like an Amazon as an example, which is going through continuous growth right now. So the messages we need to be demonstrating out there are how we're supporting through growth. How are we supporting people? Virtual onboarding. I mean, crikey, we're having to do this weird thing where we're onboarding people over Zoom calls and Microsoft Team calls and these sort of things, really, which is very unreal and very strange, but in a strange sort of way, also great stories, great initiatives. We're learning through this process, and to demonstrate how we're learning is a really strong message externally. So how are we supporting our employees through the distant learning? How are we supporting customers when we still have customers? We are continually providing customers. Holding positions is a really interesting one. I was actually I was sat in my car talking to somebody passing by who was a friend yesterday as I took my kids to his cricket practice opportunity in the next he's allowed to do now. And the guy works for a technology company that are going through a period where they're exactly a company, they're doing perfectly well as a business, but their customers aren't. And so it's not a case they don't have to lay anybody off, but they do need to maintain their employees, and their employees are all working remotely around the world, etc. And actually, their employees, if they're not careful, will be twiddling their thumbs because there's too much work to do, because their customer, which is the airline industry, is obviously not doing quite so much at the moment. The planes are in the air quite so often. So he was just talking about these brilliant initiatives that the organization had done to support their employees through this period, to allow them the freedom to be parents and to be wives and husbands and the like, and choose variable employment scenarios and things to kind of to keep them strong during the course of this period, but allow them to be to support the things that they need around them. So brilliant examples there as to how we look after those people remotely, how do we keep them together, how do we keep morale high, and how do we build their support during the course of this program. There are other organizations that are going through downsizing, and it's tough, and the messages around downsizing are much more about how do we support those people, how do we give them opportunities to reskill, and how do we give them opportunities to to feel okay and support their well-being, and to kind of listen to them through that period as they go through this period of huge uncertainty and not sure at the end of a furlough period, for example, there will still be a job for them when they come back. Focusing quickly on a couple of things that from that survey that we did at the back end of March into April, like I say, with EB and TA leaders. With the full survey, by the way, is available in a small ebook that we've just produced actually this last week or so. So drop me a line after if you want to have a copy of that. So what a couple of the questions we asked, we wanted to find out, do they plan to do more work around employee engagement, employer brand during the course of this time? Do you consider it to be a key part of marketing communication response? Over 50% said absolutely yes. We are totally looking at how we're maintaining our engaged workforce. We're thinking about communications intently. And the others were in the consideration stage. There's a few that really didn't see it as a key thing at the time. I would imagine this study was until the middle of April. I think given we've moved another month on, I reckon that red bar would have clearly moved further across by now. But certainly the response, and most natural response for a lot of organizations, so is to immediately think about how do they support their workforce in this period with engagement. And then we break that down into certain industry types. We see different characteristics, and this is why we can never say a single solution is the answer. Or a single form of communication is the answer, because if you're in a professional consulting firm, you are probably not getting the same flow of business you would normally get. It's different right now, and therefore we are in a mode where we need to deliver and support the organizations that we are serving at optimum levels. We need to listen to new business opportunities at optimum levels. We need to be sharp and ready for those opportunities, because in this competitive scenario, we can't miss those opportunities. So as you can see there, organizations like professional services, consulting, technology, and banking are really focused on empowering their employees and making sure their employees are in optimum performance right now and doing the best they can. Down the bottom, you can see organizations that are in response mode, they're in delivery mode, they are needed, they're not remote probably, they are very much on the front line. And in those places, yes, people see the importance and are conscious of the needs for high employee engagement, and et cetera, but are less proactive about it, because focus right now is support and it's delivery. And so again, those communications, the style of communications will be much more around how they support their employees, less about how they need to tell great stories about how they're doing amazing things. I covered this a little bit, and it does duplicate a little bit of a slide from John's earlier, so I won't go into this too much, but this again, these are the key things that people were doing to maintain an engaged remote workforce. As you can see, all sorts of sharing ideas, team activities, support methodology, and the daily team kind of stuff and leadership agendas and the town halls and all this kind of stuff. But please, please, please be very, very conscious of that piece at the bottom, which has for some reason, it has a very significant gap between the others, that we're doing these things outbound and as collectives, but we're maybe not doing enough to stop and listen to the employees and how they feel. I urge you to maybe think about that moving forward. So to champion a few businesses doing some cool things, I'll rattle through these reasonably quickly for the benefit of time and to lead us to questions and things. Fun one here. This was a great way of looking at how BBDO, advertising agency, they did this brilliant thing to showcase their employees by just making it like a PR announcement of hundreds of new offices and opening around the world for them and all that kind of stuff, and then little links into different people in their organization and what they're doing in their office. Great way to take existing employer brand content and turn it into sort of COVID response employer branding content. Very clever stuff, and with a lot of humor and amusement as well, which is a really lovely way to take this to the audiences. The next one looks at how we celebrate employees working from home. UBS are an organisation, let me say, who have been superb through all this. They're a customer of Universum's, and they care enormously. They're doing lots of initiatives to think about how their employees feel during the course of this period and support their employees and what it means. This was their Home But Not Alone campaign that they ran straight away on social media and through Instagram, allowing their employees to share things that are going on inside their world at the moment, their work home scenarios. They're from home colleagues, like the dog and the kids and all this kind of stuff. And what we've seen from a communication style and a marketing style through this period is the greater willingness to allow employer-generated content. Previously, it was something that's quite scary to organizations to run and manage as a communication model, but right now it becomes a very, very important and a very clear way of engaging our employees and showcasing the resilience and impression of our employees through this period. That's great for employer brand and great for employee engagement. Equally, Pega, tech company in America, are also over here in the UK, talking about the new co-workers, and the Pega Pets is the campaign they ran. So again, all their employees shared their pet stories as part of a program on Instagram. Again, just it's a human engagement, it's human stuff, it's taking away some of the hard black and white stuff around all this stuff, and it's trying to bring the love and the heart and the emotion into what they do. This was so good that actually people from other organizations also started sharing their pets on the Pega Pets hashtag. And so really, just a lovely way to engage our people and remember the fact that we've got there's some curious things that are becoming the norm, like John was talking about earlier, like dogs walking around in board meetings and the like these days. And of course, then the family element, not just about how we share things around our own children and the things that we're doing, but also organizations doing things to support the society around children, education, learning, technology to support the children through this period. So one of the phrases that was mentioned in how do I want my employers to feel about us in those 3 words thing, one of the big words was proud, pride. And so things like this generate things that will allow employees to go, I'm super proud of my company because we've done this. And this is another one as well, looks at the previous one was looking at how do we support the education environment and kids through this change of world for them, but also here this is around how do we support the society that is protecting us, whether it be food and meals, whether it be support the efforts to the help with healthcare and how do we support that, etc., etc. So lots of donations, lots of support from organizations to say, look, the world is bigger than us, we're going to do something to support it. But again, as a branding exercise, as John alluded to earlier, these are also thinly veiled PR exercises as well. They're strong messages that our employees will be proud of us. And then when all looks lost, look, airlines is a really tough world right now. SAS, Scandinavian Airlines, rather quickly, really quickly, when they realized they were in a pretty dire situation, they don't know whether they're going to get out of this. So they've started retraining their employees to be nurses. I mean, what a great response to see where they don't have a need right now. They've provided for a need to try and help the health service in the Nordics. And McDonald's, again, McDonald's stores just closed. Oldies are needing people. What did McDonald's do? They retrained. They put some of their people on loan to the Oldies to ensure that one is supported by the other organization, but most importantly, the employees are looked after through this period. So great examples of, even in crisis, even in utter crisis as an organization, there are methods of supporting our employees and demonstrating a bigger picture awareness of what we need to do. So hopefully there are lots of really interesting examples, advice and ideas around how do we get the best out of this period, how to support our people during this period. And I reiterate again, make sure you listen and understand what people need right now, because our communication style needs to be adapted to what they need, not just what we feel is the best corporate thing to do. So hope that was very useful. So I guess we're opening up to any questions that are coming from the side. I think Lauren's going to share some questions if there are any.
Yeah, we've had some great questions coming in. Obviously, keep submitting them in the chat box and we'll get through as many as we can before the end of the call. The first one, will this situation change how businesses interact in the long term with staff and customers, such as more user-generated content?
John, do you want to go first or do you want me to go?
Yeah, from my point of view, it has to. What this situation has done is expedite certain themes that were occurring anyway. So more individuals working from home, for instance, that was on the increase anyway in the incline. So whatever was happening within your business and you can see green shoots of things occurring, I'd expect this to have an impact on most of those. In terms of user-generated content, I think people are going to be more open, more sharing, more giving with their ideas, and also more acceptable of listening to other individuals and listening to their emotional states and emotional points of view on particular topics. So absolutely, I think user-generated content, and it's a really good point, will become more open and obvious within the business environment than it ever has before.
Yeah, I think the voice of the employees, all of a sudden, we now know it to be, I think we trust it now. I think, I've worked in marketing and social media communications for a number of years around talent acquisition, and employee generated content was something people were scared of. They were scared of people like screwing it up basically and saying stupid stuff or whatever. And actually now we realize maybe as organizations will start to become a little bit more human during the course of this period. We'll have more human entities around who we are. And I think we all know that all of a sudden, I think I heard from an organization yesterday that basically said that they were going to put a survey out to their employees to say, when this is over, what do you want to do? Do you want to go back to the work? Do you want to split, or do you want to work from home permanently? Because they realize now that actually they're still maintaining performance through this period. It's not affecting performance negatively. In a way, some people are optimizing their performance because maybe they're not commuting into London anymore. Maybe they're doing things that normally would take time out of the day and expend energy are all of a sudden now eliminated. So people are working home, but somebody said to me yesterday, the bags under my eyes are less. You know, I see my kids more. I feel more empowered and have more energy. So yeah, I think there's lots of things we're going to learn from this now that will shape the future of work massively.
Right. The second question, how can a business stay front of mind for potential candidates if hiring is currently paused?
Yeah, probably I should handle that one. So I think a lot of the messages that I covered today are very, very important. I think you know, obviously we work with lots of organizations are going through this period now where they aren't hiring as much. And it's an opportunity for them to step back a little bit, zoom out a little bit, and then start to think about how do we come out of this with great strength. One of the great pieces of advice out there at the moment is when all of a sudden the door opens and we're allowed to do more things, the last thing you want to be is one of thousands and thousands of employers all running through the door at the same time. What you need to do is be strategically thinking around talent pipeline and pooling right now. Where are your key areas of talent that will always be important to you? If it was hard to find, for example, female engineers in February, it will be hard to find female engineers in February next year as well. Those things don't change because of a COVID environment. So organizations need to be aware of the target talent groups that will maintain competitive challenge. We'll continue to have a competitive challenge going forward. And these are the times now to think about how do you support those people? How do you share stories of those people? How do you engage those people with the things that are blossoming in your organization through this kind of challenge? And what are you doing to support people like them in your organization? So yeah, don't turn off the tap in this period. I know organizations that have, because they're scared, and it's understandable, but I would certainly advise to don't turn off the tap to those very, very key target talent areas that are important to the growth of your business and the recovery of your business coming out.
Yeah, just to build on that, actually, thanks, Steve, is just look internally and think about how people's jobs have changed and will change over the long term, and then think about people's motivations to do those jobs and what message you've currently got and how your message to those people, your talent pooling, needs to alter. I think that's really key, and hopefully that's come across in our slides, but that's something I just wanted to double down on.
Yeah, great shout.
Lovely. We've had another question through here. So my employer has been excellent in open communication, including work-related topics, personal stories, and emphasising that our health and well-being is the most important thing right now. The directors have also said to talk to them if we need more flexibility right now. As HR, I'm finding that there's a huge amount of negativity and colleagues feeling like this isn't good enough, so morale seems low. I don't know what else the directors can do. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, my advice would be, Sorry, John. No, sorry. My personal advice is to break down communication to smaller into smaller segments. Look, every organisation is doing the big messaging, and like you say, there is great communication from the top. But I think what we need to do is we need to sometimes communicate with our line managers and segment leaders and things like to recognize, to help them recognize their role in this and empower them to have the skills to support employees at the cutting edge, effectively, if you like. And I think the scale of communication through an organization, it isn't just from the top. It can't just be a single corporate message from the top. Some people don't engage with that. They don't buy into that kind of stuff. You know, it covers a certain period. You have to break things down through the journey. So I think anything you can do as an HR function to help support, listen to the segment leaders within your organization, those who have small teams that they look after, or maybe quite large localized teams to look after, how can we empower them with support, information, knowledge, and stories that will, and maybe some opportunities that they can communicate to it's very, very difficult for one person to impact, let's say, 10,000 people. Very, very hard. You have to break it down into segments. That would be my advice from what I've seen from organizations doing extremely well at this.
Yeah, it's really good advice. And to just double up on that, the back to business message needs to come through very strongly. The strongest thing I've seen in the last couple of weeks was our global CEO back in the Dusseldorf office, running a webinar with people in the background walking around and a sense of normality. So I think as we get closer back to normal times, that thread of back to business needs to be stronger and stronger and resonate more powerfully in your comms internally.
Yeah, agreed.
Right, and kind of linked to that one, how can I support managers who may be remotely managing teams for the first time?
I guess for me, technology is really important in that. So to make sure that everybody's got what they need and are clear on how to use those platforms to stay connected. You know, Microsoft Teams, I think, is up to 300 million users. It's like 1,000% growth, but actually they've rolled out so many new features within Teams, like polling. You can do live quizzes on them. So sending out communications about these platforms and then making sure your teams can use them to help them manage remotely, I think, is of paramount importance.
Yeah, the other thing that, because I've found it hard myself, so this is why I think it's a thing, is to try and retain some consistency in messaging and purpose behind what you're trying to do. I think the challenge of not being sat around your colleagues every day is you don't have the casual interaction that you would normally have, and therefore what was happening is we're being pulled from things from left, right, and centre in segments of our day that pull us and pull our attention much more maybe do. And because we can't see our colleagues in front of us, we don't think of them as fast as we would normally do when we sat around them. And so I think one of the things to try and make sure that you have is this consistent thread of goals and intent and purpose behind what you're trying to do, what priorities are now, and revisit it daily with your team or in regular kind of things, because I think that's one of the hardest things is being pulled from pillar to post with things happening over here and something over happening, because actually we are getting lots of communication now, and the challenge with lots of communication is actually knowing how to distill it in the best way and decide what is important and what is not now, and it sways our brain and mind. So try and find some really kind of core pillars in your purpose and communication right now with your team, and make sure that's communicated really, really clearly, because it's quite hard. I find that hard myself.
Great. And then one final question as we wrap up, is there anything else that your businesses are doing around staff wellbeing and communications that you would recommend?
We've got a great Strava running club. And so there are people that are members trying to make funny shapes around where they've run in their local parks or beachfronts or whatever it might be. So yeah, it's a quippy one at the end, I guess. But that actually, we've got hundreds of people that are members of that, and that's worked really well. So a bit of a trick there for you.
Yeah, well, that's a much more fun one. I'm going to drop back into I think the most important thing we've seen is the internal pulse survey. We have learned so much about our organization by just learning what people are feeling right now. Because the fun things are happening, and that we've got the, we've got the Facebook workplace thing going with all the funny pictures and things. But again, I go back to the thing. I just think the thing that really hit me the most is when we read the results this last week of our internal pulse study, and actually what people really think, and it surprises people. Good and positive, but good and negative, by the way. You know, it's really, really surprising, and particularly because we operate, actually, we've got people in over 20 countries in the world. So it's and some of them are only the only person in their country, or only 2 or 3 people in their country. So so yeah, I'm going to go back to that and say that was something that we've done that has probably had the most impact on people's awareness of their organisation during the Christmas period.
Great. All right. Well, thanks, Steve. Thanks everybody for taking the time out of your days to listen to us. As I said, this has been recorded, and we'll send the recording through. And if you have any lasting questions, our contact details are below. We'll be sure to come back to you, and we'll try and get back to all the questions that have been asked, because there's a number I can see post the event offline. But thanks very much, and I'm sure we'll see you again soon.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.